I've been making a vast assortment of Ninjago-related videos for years now. Whilst Ninjago is one of the most pondered franchises, it's not my only enjoyment. One popular style of video that doesn't seem to be very abundant in this community are what-ifs. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, there is a reason for this. There just isn't that much concrete leeway. A lot of Ninjago's storyline is incredibly linear, with very few split-offs, and when it does actually diverge, it's oftentimes obviously dropped, completely leaving a plot hole that the writers have explained on Twitter, which isn't canon, so they can still change it, leading into a lot of these situations being pretty much untouchable. This being said, it means a lot of types of videos would veer heavily into fanfiction, which the only guide being our general understanding of the characterization of each character, rather than the specifics or how they were, when they did it, blah blah blah. An example being Chen. You could imagine a timeline in which he attempts a myriad of different plans in order to control Ninjago, rather than the Anaconda one he had in the main timeline, and this is the idea, the concept behind this series. Leave a like and subscribe if you want more of this. First one is going to be, what if Skybound happened? Right, so there's a real big problem here that I had to consider when doing this. What I assumed to be part of the reason why it was reset in the first place was because of how much crazy damage Nadakhan did to Ninjago itself. Honestly, the insane terraforming has such a huge impact on the rest of the series, let alone the characters that died, so I'm gonna have to cover two options here. Jade's wish is to wish back Nadakhan into his bottle, but nothing changes to Ninjago, nothing falls down or anything, but there is now massive chunks of Ninjago floating in the sky. And the second option is that we go over time travel to see if we can soft reset the events while still keeping major functions in reference to future seasons. Following Season 6, we have Dead of the Departed, Hands of Time, Sun Compedon, Hunted, and much of the Oni. We're not going to be doing Season 11 because I'm going to wait for the Ice chapter to finish. First thing I think happens is Ninjago's leadership gets majorly thrown about. Currently we know about the Mayor of Ninjago City, who we've never seen, and the Royals. Basically the police chief is in charge for all intents and purposes, and I think he'd probably do a good job. I believe Yang would still make a move, but considering that everything is now in the sky, I somehow doubt the ninja would have the time to hang around in the museum, and I don't think Yang would use that method. We don't know if the museum would still be left up in the sky, or even if it exists in this timeline at this point. I don't know what Yang would do, but let's say he uses some other method and ends up more or less in the same. Remember, Cole was telling a story, so it's up for a tiny bit of interpretation, I guess. Hands of Time is where things get interesting. Since Pixel was erased by Nadakhan, there is no Samurai X2. And if we assume the landscape changes to correct plans, we could have been looking at a vastly different season. The Time Blades and Chronix's return are going to happen no matter what. However, if Nia dies, a few things will affect the season. I think Zane will still save Cyrus Ball and get knocked out. Technically, an argument can be made that someone else does it because Pixel pushes him in that slight moment, or say he still gets knocked out to fight by Chronix, and this time Jay works on him. I feel like Jay gets somewhat overshadowed by Nia a lot when he's just as proficient of an inventor and as a mechanic as she is. I think he'd be able to basically end up doing the same amount as Nia didn't, meaning he fails. No Pixel inside means no new Samurai X, however. Next up is the slow motion blades, entry into the modern era. Depending on where Jade took Zane to work on him, be it Samurai X cave because he needed tools, or even in the junkyard, I think he'd still try and go and find them, perhaps bringing Zane along with him instead. Operation Blackout would still render power out, and they'd have to go to the power plant, which would lead into Jade going back home to fight the Vermilion. Zane wakes up, I guess, then the Time Twins attack the Agency Temple, and the battle goes about the same. Only problem here though, no Samurai X. I don't think Lloyd would die, like he has both Ejitsu and Dragon, so he'd either get over his fear and summon it in time, or he'd remember that he has Ejitsu and would land on the ground. Though if he does actually pass on, this raises the question of would he meet the first Ninjutsu Master? At this point in time, Garmadon is still dead. Does that affect things? I feel like Lloyd always had a res option. I know that might sound strange, but I feel like him dying in much of the Oni is evident that he could have died beforehand and been revived. That's basically just speculation, but I don't see why the first Ninjutsu Master would save it once, but then not another time. The ninja would still search for the Time Twins' lair and find it, with Kai alone left to stew in his anger. He'd find his father, and in that situation I believe they'd have a far more drawn-out fight. He'd also likely not listen to start off with due to the fact that they are two seemingly alive, but just hanging out there. This would drive a massive wedge between the three of them, as Kai would be by no means over Nia's death, and the fact that his parents were apparently alive and traitors, coupled with his already hasty attitude, and made the situation quite tense. I honestly don't believe it would be resolved by the time the baddies show up and eavesdrops in the original timeline, and so I'm not really sure what would go down here. My guess is that they take Kai prisoner and use him as more leverage over his parents. At this point, Kai would begin to realize the truth, and I imagine that as the ninja retreat to Cyrus Borg, they would also find Kai. Look, I can't predict how to write this, but I imagine the team would break out, save Ray and Maya, and Ray would be hit by the time punch like in the original. And they'd reveal that Kai and Maya would have to go into the Boiling Sea. I guess the most logical conclusion to that, the ninja fight off the Vermilion and the Time Twins while the two find the blade. Again, I'm not really sure how this would play out. I imagine either the Time Twins would defeat the ninja and take the final blade, but with the duo coming in pursuit and entering the time portal, same thing would happen, but with Maya as there instead of Nia, or the ninja win. Either way, I do think it would end positively for the ninja, even if we was lost at time. Sons of Garmadon. Big changes here. If the landscape of Ninjago is messed up as I'm thinking, and leadership has taken action unlike the staggered times of the main timeline, I don't think the Sons of Garmadon would even work. I mean, they're a biker gang, but Ninjago is a whole bunch of floating chunks. It doesn't really work. And I get that Harumi would just get more justification, but I don't think she'd try to revive Garmadon. I mean, she could just very easily turn the likely despondent people affected by Jay's wish against the ninja. I honestly don't see why she tried to revive him, and if we say that Lloyd died back in Hansa time, and maybe met even his father, I reckon he'd be aware of the Oni, and so therefore seeking out Mustake as they did, as they are perhaps even pushed from the realm. An entire timeline diversion would commence with the ninja likely retreating to the first realm to get answers for the entire situation. I think the events would pan out quite closely to the Hunted arc, and yes, I do see them still finding Blue. No clue about how Harumi managed to find him before them, where they spent an entire year looking for him. With the new layout of the land, I'm just going to give him back to them. Hunted would probably go about the same, but I do think the ninja would be far more aware of the Oni, and they might even stay in the realm until they arrive. At that point, they'd likely flee on Firstborn to prepare to fight the Oni in Ninjago. The Oni would take over Ninjago, and they'd have their big finale. The faith of the ninja being put back into the hearts and minds of the people, but perhaps the ninja might be a bit more wary of them from now on. Okay, but what about the other option? What about the soft reset timeline? How would that work? Well, this just means what would happen if we skewered the events so they happened, but they just remember it all. I'm going to look at it event by event. As I made clear, some things like the time blades or the Oni arriving are set in stone. Nadakhan could technically get released by Yang on the Day of the Departed, but considering what Nadakhan did to Yang's temple and the risks involved, I don't think he'd bother. It could serve as a legit perfect distraction for his plot, but it might be a little bit outside of Yang's capabilities. Not sure, I'm just getting the feeling. Hands of Time would go about the same, though probably with Yang's temple on the ground, so it might be a little bit harder to defend. Sons of Garmadon doesn't really matter, because Sons of Garmadon kind of changed everything anyway. Speaking of that, it would probably happen the exact same way, just with Nadakhan fresh in the mind of Harumi. Hunted, assuming nothing happens in the timeline, yeah, same way. And finally, much of the Oni. I 100% know who Nadakhan was, and everything happens, and the mural has got Nadakhan on, but I don't see anything else happening. The only other thing is that because they are acutely aware of Nadakhan's revenge, they understand that realm destruction is a big deal. But they already got that, so I don't really think there's much changing. So it doesn't really affect that much. Overall, the timeline is very interesting. This could have gone 1,000 different ways simply from the kind of wish Jay made. So, although the structure of the series remains close, it diverges heavily towards the end. I can't predict how the writers would have dealt with this, and frankly, this is my first what if. Not sure how people react to the editing I already did to the timeline, so I didn't want to go overboard with assumptions. Hence the two versions. If you guys enjoyed this and want to see more, make sure you hit the like button and share this with your friends. So slap the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!